can start by saying I studied marketing in university, and then I started running an internet consulting company in the 90s, and then in 2000 I sold the company, and then I said, okay, so now what do I want to do with my life? And I said, okay, I want to focus on my biggest interest, which is creativity. So since 2000 I have been studying creativity, and the last 6 years I've been doing it from Asia. So I used to live in China, now I live in Singapore. And what I do is I basically, I just study, when I say creativity, I mean business creativity. So I study creativity, I interview people, companies, how are they doing things differently, and then I repackage that in seminars, speeches, conference keynotes, and books. So I've written 9 books, most of them are on creativity. Yeah, so I should have brought one, because the idea book is different. Every creativity book is tells you to do things differently, right? So every creativity book tells the reader that you should do things differently. But most creativity books are not different. So for me, I found that very strange. So when I decided to do a creativity book, I did a book that in itself is different. And it's different in the sense that my idea book is 50% book and 50% notebook. That means it's a book where you can read about how can I become a more creative person, but it's also a notebook where you can write down your ideas. That means that the idea book is actually bought both by the people who define themselves as being uncreative, because they want to learn how can I become more creative, but also by the people who define themselves as creative, because they're inspired by the whole concept of book and notebook. The other reason why it's a creative way of doing it is because you, as the user, are interacting with the book. So instead of just reading the book like listening to a dialogue, listening to a monologue, you're now more having a conversation with the book. So you're reading what I wrote, and then you write your ideas. So it's like back and forth. So it's a creativity book that makes you think. My goal is to write one book at least every other year. And when I write a book about what am I the most interested in at the moment, right? So the last book that I just published a beta version of last week is called One World, One Company. Okay. And it's about what does it mean to be a global company. Because I travel, I think the last 30 days I've been in 12 countries. The last year I've been in more than 20 countries, and I've spoken in more than 45 countries. So I travel a lot around the world, and I see businesses around the world, and I see that some companies are having a great time right now, and they're like enthusiastic and positive, and some companies are like struggling and they're afraid and so on. So I said, why is this? And I started studying these companies that are thriving, and what I realized is that a lot of them have this global mindset. So I started interviewing companies. So yesterday I interviewed Emirates. For example, Emirates is a very global airline. They have 167 nationalities working in the airline. Most airlines are very nationalistic. And Emirates are doing great. They're growing much faster than everyone else because they have that mindset that we are an airline for global people, not just a national. So that is what the book is about, to have this global mindset. And I write that book because I'm interested in it. The book, The Developing World, I wrote that book because I moved to China in 2005. And I moved to China because I wanted to teach creativity to the Chinese. But when I came to China, I realized that, they need to learn from us, but we can also learn from them. So for that book, I went around to a lot of different developing countries to see what can the developed world learn from the developing world. And I started identifying things where I think people in developing countries have an advantage over people from developed countries. And when it comes to Pakistan, I think Pakistan should have the mentality that you can learn as much, if not more, from developing countries than from not only look at what the developed world is doing. My personal driving force is that I like to learn about creativity in as many different industries as possible and many different countries as possible. So the last the last months, I went to North Korea, I went to Ukraine, I went to Spain. I mean, I go to countries where I haven't been to learn about, okay, so how does the North Koreans look at creativity? How does the Ukrainians? Now I'm here to learn, how does the Pakistani look at creativity? How did they react to my message? What do they say? How do they answer? And then I can compare that with the other countries I've been to. So for me, that's a good thing with my job. I get paid to go to countries and learn. It's a great job. Look at it, it's like a circle. I go around and I speak about the books that I have written, and then I meet a lot of business people, and we have a discussion, and we start talking about things that they are, and that creates new ideas. So that leads into the next book. So the developing world was about what can one part of the world learn about the other part. The One World, One Company, which is a book about being global, that kind of say, okay, what can the world learn from the world? So it's like the next step. And if you're going to write business books, and if you're going to be a keynote speaker, and honestly charge quite a lot of money for like 1 hour speech, you need to be able to give people some kind of ideas or thoughts that they haven't really been able to articulate yet, something they want to learn, something that pushes them forward. And that's my job, that's what I do. Well, I'm here. I'm invited to Pakistan by Tarbis, and we're doing this conference on Lahore. And so, of course, then I ask them, because their job is to bring conferences here, right? So I say, okay, which other people have you been here? How did the crowd react? How should I, because I've never done a workshop or a speech for Pakistanis before. Give me some advice. Can you provoke them? Can you, how much can you, is there something you shouldn't joke about? Things like that. But generally, I read a quote about Michael Jackson, and he said, how is it to perform in different countries? And he said, actually, there's no difference. Okay. He said, in my concert, they cry in the same place, they cheer in the same place, they laugh in the same place, they stand up in the same place in the concert, because they're all humans. And my speeches are actually quite similar, regardless of which country I go to, because everyone is human. There are not so big differences that people think. Well, the way I do my speeches is, my goal is try to get them to be provoked and inspired at the same time. This is the most difficult speech to do, because if you provoke, you get a little bit angry, and if you're angry, you're a little bit hesitant to the speaker. But if you can pull it through, then you have some, because when you're angry, or not angry, but when you're provoked, you say, I don't agree with this is not right, and your brain starts working. If you agree with everything I say, then you're not learning anything. So if I can push your boundaries a little bit, but not enough so you become angry, but enough to get you to challenge what I'm saying, and maybe say, I don't agree with this, or what do you mean by that? And then pull them back again, so that when they leave inspired. That's the best. That's what I try to do. Yes, so Tarbis and they actually have a little tour, small tour, right? So we are here now, and then we go to Islamabad, then we go to Lahore. So this is now I have almost a week in Pakistan. After that, I fly home on Friday. I'm in Singapore over the weekend. On Sunday, I fly to Moscow, doing a speech in Moscow. Then I fly directly from there to Shanghai, and then I fly to Sweden, and then I'm going to spend 6 weeks in Sweden in my summer house, not moving at all, because the last few months I traveled like crazy. So now I need to balance that, because you have your best ideas when you're totally relaxed, right? So I have the crazy traveling months for 8 months per year, and then 4 months per year I just sit in a house and do nothing, just to think, to come up with new ideas.